Hello, and welcome to an exciting episode of That Cruise Show. Today we have our faithful co-hosts, as usual, Ashley and James, who probably wish they were in Alaska right now, enjoying some mild temperatures.
What are you talking about here?
San Diego, it's about 80 degrees, and I know people say 80 degrees isn't bad, but if you have lived in San Diego long enough, you know 80 degrees is hot. And we also want to welcome our guest today. Do you want me to just call you Captain Dan?
Captain Dan, I've been called worse.
Okay. The CEO from Uncruise Adventures, who's currently in Juneau with some great news for us today. Dan will also tell us about all the fabulous destinations Uncruise sails to. As always, we start off with some news topics that might be going on in the industry right now. Do you guys have anything today, Ashley or James?
Well, I guess I'll go first while Ashley is. I think the biggest thing, just across the board, I feel like we have some optimism as far as what the future of the cruise industry is. There's some things that didn't go as well as we would hope, but probably not unexpectedly over in Europe with AIDA. But the fact that our own CDC has opened up a comment period for people to share their thoughts, and man, I wish I could read all of the unadulterated stuff, because there are as many people that hate cruising with a passion. Most of them have probably never actually sailed. As there are people who love it and understand that this industry is by far one of the safest, most attention to hygiene and cleanliness tourism experience that you can possibly get. But nonetheless, the fact that they're opening it for discussion means that it's not a closed discussion, and I think that's ultimately a good idea. So, fingers crossed that Dream and AIDA have some successful sailings, and and that the other guys who are already sailing or will be sailing shortly prove to be safe and healthy as well. So, fingers crossed.
Do you have anything else, Ashley, that you've heard?
Yeah, so I believe since our last episode, Royal Caribbean has announced that they're going to be switching up the way they're doing their muster drills. Instead of having everybody assembling in one spot, I guess with social distancing in mind, they're going to be broadcasting the muster information on the in-cabin TVs, which they've done for years. But this will be happening instead of the actual crowds gathering in the theater and on the decks and wherever else major cruise ships tend to gather people. They'll also be doing it on an app, from what I understand. So I guess that the TV will be more for people who aren't maybe so tech savvy. And then they will have to actually go to a checkpoint and check in with the crew. And the crew will verify that they have watched the appropriate information, so they know what they're supposed to do in case of an emergency. And then they'll check off their cabin number like they have always done at the muster drills. But I guess this is just a way to sort of avoid having hundreds of people shoulder to shoulder for long periods of time in one room. And they're looking at sort of sharing this technology with other cruise lines. And I'm assuming, I know Norwegian was the first one to kind of share that technology with them. So I assume this is a product of the partnership that those two corporations formed to come up with some solutions to this COVID situation.
Yeah, I'm interested in how that actually will function, because I think that clearly half of the issue is the knowledge of what to do. But I think at the same time, it is kind of helpful to know where your muster spot will be, because that is something that you're not going to be thinking about rationally if the ship starts sinking.
Honestly,
Dan, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you're probably closer to that discussion than any of us.
Well, there's nothing like a good drill. And in the United States, we're required as U.S. operators to, do the drill before we actually get underway. But, working under COVID-19, that does change it. So in our case, what we've done is reduced capacity to where when we do muster, we can easily be at social distancing and that type of thing.
And it's probably a lot easier on your ships where you can kind of point to where you go, as opposed to being
Exactly.
on a 100,000 gross ton ship where you're on deck 7, muster station 15.
Yeah, ours are truly more boats than ship. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
Well, if there's no other new news, we do have some great news today, and Captain Dan is going to take it away from us with his great news about sailings. Well, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Heather. It is great news. Uncruise Adventures will be launching this Saturday on our first trip of the Alaska season. We normally would have 8 of our small ships that are all under 88 passengers traveling in Southeast Alaska out of Juneau, Ketchikan, and Sitka. But this year with COVID-19, that's obviously changed. So here we are coming up on August 1st, this Saturday, when we'll be getting underway with our vessel, the Wilderness Adventurer, appropriately named, I think, for this period of time. And that's going to be operating at roughly at about 60% of capacity or a little bit lower. So we can maintain social distancing and all that good stuff. That'll be Saturday right here in Juneau. In fact, right behind me is our dock. Yahoo!
Yay!
Check out that view. I'm so jealous.
And that's Mount Juneau you're seeing right here. And over to your, I guess this direction, whatever that is from you, is where the Mount Roberts tram is. I actually have some friends going up there today.
Yeah.
It's closed, but there's some maintenance work going on. So my lady got to go up and do a trip to the top of the tram, which was pretty cool for this year, right?
James, you're on mute.
Well, now you can actually hear me. We did that tram along with our closest 1,000, 2,000 friends, and I can only imagine what that would be like to go up there without having a line 20 or 30 people deep to take that perfect picture from the view spot.
Yeah, it's definitely a different deal, and the owner of the tram, Gold Belt Native Corporation, has been kind enough to get a few locals up there to do some work, and it is different, no doubt. We have more bears in town than we usually have. There's a lot of research going on the whales here in Southeast and what they're doing with no vessel traffic. It's a little scientific project going on up here this summer, I'll tell you.
So, do you guys have laboratories, or is it, how much science are you guys doing on the boats, or is it mostly offshore kind of exploring?
It's both. We actually go snorkeling here in Southeast Alaska. We were the first ones to start that up years ago, and so yeah, we get right in there. We're not so much on the research. We do share our numbers that we see or locations of different species with some of the organizations we work with here in Juneau. But for the most part, we're more tied to the adventure travel trade end of things. So yeah, like you say, paddleboarding, snorkeling, hiking, kayaking, taking skiff trips or strolls on the beach, all that kind of thing.
And you do fishing trips as well? Can the people do a salmon fishing excursion and then eat the salmon back on the boat, or?
Well, what we do is we set that up with locals, different folks, and that's generally a pre-post. So it depends also where the salmon are at a particular time, because right now they're just kind of working their way into the inside area of Southeast Alaska. So early in the season, most people fish out towards Sitka, that type of thing.
Cool.
So Dan, I'm very curious. I mean, obviously Alaska is a selling point. It's a bucket list destination for a lot of cruisers. And not many lines are sailing there this year. And given the extra layer of uncertainty about the virus situation, obviously those are big selling points for people to try out Uncruise. But if you have a person who normally cruises with a much larger cruise line like a Carnival or Royal Caribbean, what can they expect if they say, hey, this is something I really want to try out? What are some of the key differences besides the ones that are more obvious?
Yeah, I think with any of the small U.S. flag vessels like those of Uncruise Adventures, we're really more aligned with the adventure travel trade part of our industry rather than the cruise industry. The boat is kind of our weapon to get us where we need to go. So the boat is the secondary item. With Uncruise Adventures, the primary is everything off the boat. So what somebody would expect to see if they're looking for port calls and seeing some of the towns and cities throughout Southeast Alaska, go on a cruise ship. That's a better setup. If they're interested in the outdoors and adventuring and taking time to do research or read their favorite book or even just go all out and climb mountains or go on all day kayaks or just learn how to do that stuff, then we're the right product. And that does speak a little bit how we're able to activate now when others can't, just because we do round trip Juneau. We don't do any port calls, so there's no exposure to others. And we do most of our stuff, in fact, almost all of it is in groups of 8 to 12 people, maybe 3, 4 different groups per day that a person could get involved with that's out in nature. So, the chances for COVID-19 to propagate are much, much lower in this type of situation.
So where is this ship that is leaving Saturday going?
Well, it is doing, it's on a Glacier Bay itinerary, and it's going to be spending 2 full days and 2 full nights inside Glacier Bay National Park, likely to be the only boat in there all season with more than a pleasure boat. And then it wanders around what's called Admiralty Island, which is known as Kutsnahu, the Fortress of the Bears in native language. So they go around Kutsnahu, and then they go into Tracy and Endicott Arms, which are fabulous glacier fjords that the small vessels use quite a bit. And then, of course, a lot of time at Point Adolphus and Frederick Sound looking for humpbacks and orcas, which have been very prevalent this season.
So is this one of the regular scheduled cruises, or is this an adapted? I'm looking on your website right here.
Yeah, it is a little bit adapted in that typically we used to include a little port call at a place called Haines, and since we're in this COVID situation, we just didn't want to expose townspeople or our guests to potential infection. So what we did is we just said, no, we're just going to go out as a team on the boat. They're all tested when they get here in Alaska. And so we're doing an entirely wilderness trip for this season on this particular boat.
Okay.
You got some great excursions, and frankly, the prices are not as exotic as I was expecting for certainly a level of service that. I mean, your food looks phenomenal in some of the pictures I saw, and being able to be. You said it's under 100 people, or is it under 200 people on the boats?
Well, all of ours are 88 or under. This particular boat was built to sail with 74, but we're maxing it out at 38 people for these trips. Yeah. Well, this is the Wilderness Adventurer, and I keep looking around to see if she's pulling up to her dock. They're out on sea trials today, and I'm not quite seeing them yet, so I think they're still out. But she's a green hull.
So are these, I assume these are super social trips then, because cruising in general is a lot more social than your average land-based vacation, but with a group of 30 something people, you're going to get to know everyone, I would assume. Is that something that you guys sort of aim for?
Oh yeah, I mean that's part of the bond. I mean, people our name is Uncruise Adventures, right? But our guests often put a F in front of it and call us Fun Cruise Adventures. There's nothing, and part of that is it's all inclusive. People are going to go on there; they're not going to be nickel and dime for a beer or whatever. And that just builds an environment that's really great. Now, when you only have 30 some people on a boat that's designed for almost double that, it just opens that door for opportunity even more.
That's pretty awesome. Now, I noticed one of the features on your deck plan says underwater camera.
Yeah, our boats generally, I think all of them now have underwater cameras on the bow. Those are most useful when we have porpoise and dolphin off the bow. And those go in through the televisions that are in cabins and in public areas. So it doesn't happen every day, but when it happens, it's a real highlight. They're literally just inches away, the tails from
Wow.
the camera.
That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
I know some of the pictures I saw of, I'm not sure where it was, but one of the pictures I saw was a bunch of people on the bow. I mean, way closer to the whales than I've even been on a whale watching trip. And I just, that level of intimacy is frankly, worth a lot of money. I mean, you can't, in many ways, you can't buy that, but you can get lucky and buy that, with one of your excursions. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the real secret to be able to do that is patience. And you can't be on a schedule where you have to make a port call the next morning or that afternoon. We like to say that nature doesn't work on our clock, and that's really true. So to get those wonderful whale shots like you're seeing, a lot of times it means the boat just shuts down in an area where there's a lot of whales and just sits and waits for a few hours. And generally speaking, the whales are curious and come up to a boat that's just sitting still. Where if you're on a port-to-port call, you're rushing at 20 knots to make the next port call. Yeah.
Right. Now, one of our readers, blogger friend of ours, saying, "Hey, Captain Dan, how's the weather, and what's the best time of the year to cruise there?" Clearly, this year is not the typical cruise, but what's the best time to do an uncruise in Alaska?
Well, I would say, and whether it's Uncruise Adventures or any company, you just kind of have to look at what the seasons bring. Now, there are a lot of companies. We start in early April and end in late October. Early October. So early April to early October. And that brings in a whole plethora. Now, the early season happens to be the driest in Southeast Alaska. So April, May, right through maybe the first week of June is definitely the driest period. You still see whales, but you don't see them as prolific as you do in July and August. And so it kind of depends what you're looking for. Now, if you come to Southeast Alaska in April and visit Juneau early May, it's like a local town. It's like you are visiting and nobody else is around. So we like to say for those people that really want to get the feel for a community, that really the early part of the season is best. If you're really interested in whales, it is that July, August, very early September. Bears early and late, salmon later in the season. You can go on and on. It's that perfect timing. Everybody has their own gig as far as what they're looking for.
What about October? What is October like? Because I've always been curious on that time frame.
Well, what you get, and we just finish up usually around the 3rd of October, and what you find is that it's definitely there's less light. Now, we still have whales here, and we still see bears, and that, in fact, sometimes in late September and October, we see more bears as they're starting to kind of put on that last fat for going into hibernation during, coming up in November. But generally speaking, what you miss in October and September is light. So right now, we're sitting here at, July 26th or so. And we still have a lot of daylight, and it's truly amazing. Of course, in April, May, June, it's people that aren't used to it have to make sure to put the shutters over their windows because they'll be up all night.
That was definitely an adjustment that we had. We did our first Alaskan cruise 3 years ago, I think, Heather, and you look at the window and look out the window of the bar, to be honest, and we're like, oh, it's only like 8 o'clock. No, it's like 10 o'clock, 10:30 or something like that. So
it's amazing. I as part of an Alaska trip that I did a few years ago, I was in Dawson City in the Yukon, and it was, we left a bar at like 3 a.m, and it wasn't bright sunlight, but it was still light enough that you thought it was maybe like 8 or 9 p.m, like just before the sun went down. It was very weird. Very weird, but really cool.
I bet that 9 a.m. roll call for the tour bus was brutal, though.
Well,
no comment.
When you get up as far north as Dawson City or Anchorage North, I mean, there are midnight baseball leagues that take place every summer.
So
So
cool.
it is kind of cool.
Now, obviously, Alaska is kind of probably the crown jewel of a lot of stuff you do, but I'm equally excited about some of the other destinations you guys do. I mean, you do Hawaii, you do Costa Rica. I obviously anybody who's listened to me talk about cruising knows how much I love the Sea of Cortez, and hopefully as much I promote it, it doesn't ruin it because I don't want tens of thousands of people to be there, but hundreds of people I'm cool with. So what are some of your favorite places to go?
Well, there's so many places that I just plain love. But as you said, I'm an Alaska boy for sure. But so we always look for places that somehow replicate the wilderness and loveliness of Alaska, and even in Hawaii, we're able to find that because there are parts of Hawaii that are off the beaten path. We base out of Molokai, for instance, and that is just as authentic as it gets in the Pacific. And then, of course, even in places like Costa Rica and Panama, it's amazing, particularly when you look at Panama, how remote Panama really is. There's all this infrastructure around the canal, but once you get away from the canal, it is wild, woolly, and very back to nature. So, yeah, we have trips in Belize, we have Panama and Costa Rica. Hawaii is a very big one for us, particularly going into next year, because we know that people are going to be closer to home, North Americans for the most part. So we're really big on Alaska and Hawaii next season, our Columbia Snake River product. And then we have a new trip that does what's called the Salish Sea these days, which is the San Juan Islands and Puget Sound of Washington
awesome.
State. Yeah. So that one's going to be a little shorter trip. It's going to be 5 nights, 6 days, round trip out of Seattle. And that's really in response. This is a route we've run before, but it's really in response to folks wanting to have easier access, want to be able to drive there, take a train, just or a short flight. So that itinerary is another one that's all based on the outdoors and that kind of thing. And then, of course, we also operate in Galapagos and that kind of thing.
I spent a lot of summers my grandparents had a house on Main Island in the San Juan Islands there between Vancouver and Victoria, and it's a great place that I think a lot of people. I mean, obviously, people from BC know by taking the ferry over to Victoria or something like that, but great fishing there, some great little community, people who love art. There's some really cool art stuff. I can't remember the exact town because I was too young, but I remember there's a lot of art, and I think that's what really appeals to me about some of these smaller cruise lines, smaller ship adventures, that there's places that the big ships just simply can't go, and because of that, they probably haven't destroyed it. Because without a doubt, if you had 2,000, 10,000, 15,000 people coming into a town, it's just not going to be the same town as it would be.
Yeah, the great thing about cruising, there's a niche for everybody, right? And I've always rode on the coattails of my big brothers and sisters marketing, meaning big ship marketing, right?
Yeah.
And while I'm not a big ship person myself, I get it and understand that there's value to all of it. And you're right. We were down in Seattle not too long ago, and we took our sailboat out and we saw orcas on the 2 days we were out, 2 different pods, and that's cool. Common down there. And so yeah, we think that our Puget Sound / Salish Sea, the new term, is really going to be appealing for guests going into next season.
Now, speaking of these, I noticed one of the things that's a little different about your website versus like a typical cruise booking experience is that you submit a request, and then an agent from your team contacts them back. Is that all inside sales, or do you funnel those out to travel agents, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do both. We have a whole listing of what we call our adventurists, which are kind of like our company consortia of agents that have passed through our system and understand Uncruise adventures. So if people are looking for an agent, we have a lot of ways to recommend agents that are approved in our system. The booking engine, we, like everybody, you debate, do you go fully online or not? But our product is a little more complex in that it's a higher price point. People really want to know what they're getting. But because of the way the activities work and it not being a normal port-to-port cruise, there's a lot of, I won't say hand-holding, but just a lot of really good questions that need the human touch, that are, to really be able to sell the product. A lot like luxury products used to be, where, it used to be that luxury products were all very many touch points with people. And we're finding that and believe that the adventure side is very much that way.
Yeah, initially when I saw it, I'm like, oh, these guys are behind the scenes, and they kind of step back a second and say, it's actually kind of nice that it seems set up to be more of a concierge kind of experience where the agent has an opportunity to get to know the customer and ultimately you as a brand get to know the customer, because it's not 2,000 people on a boat, it's 100 or less.
Yeah, and we also want to make sure, just as much as we want to make sure the client is happy with us, we want to make sure we're happy with them. And so, in other words, what you need to do when you have a small vessel like this, you need to make sure you have the right client. We don't, if somebody were to come on board our boats and necessarily think they were going to be in gowns every night and have ice carvings, we'd have the wrong client, right? And instead, we're carving a piece of ice on the beach and maybe doing melt-off contests, this kind of thing. So it is really important that the touch points in the sales process are really strong, that we have really knowledgeable agents and internal staff as well.
As a travel advisor, when I guide people towards different cruise lines, they always ask me, well, what's included? What's this? What's that? And I know you said, food, beverages, everything's included, but I mean, you were talking about snorkeling. Should they bring their own snorkel gear, or do they get fresh new ones, or do you supply that? The wetsuits, what kind of things do you supply?
Everything. Wetsuits. Now, I will be the first to tell you, though, if we have an experienced snorkeler, we're always going to say at least bring your own mask, because that's the most important thing to fit, right? And even like we have what we call muck boots. The brand that we all love here in Alaska are called Extra Toughs. And we have all those boots on board, but the same thing, if somebody has muck boots or Extra Toughs, we suggest they bring them, although it is pretty bulky. So we carry it all on board. So yeah, all the food, all the excursions, beverages are all included. The only thing it isn't is the gratuity to the crew.
Okay.
Speaking of like muck boots and evening wear and stuff, people do love packing tips. I assume that since a lot of these sailings are very much nature based, that it is a more casual vibe. So besides the muck boots, what would you like? What are some key things that people should bring? And is there laundry, facilities available on board? Can people do laundry? Should they pack light? Should they, what can they leave at home?
Yeah, dressy clothes they can leave at home. It's if you've ever been into an REI store, an outdoor outfitting store, people are dressed a lot like me. They have a buff that they put on. Today in today's world, you can even get the Uncruise Adventures mask.
Nice.
Nice.
Which, all our guests will be getting as a memento. Can you imagine 30, 40 years from now, grandparents telling their grandchildren about that mask and how they sailed during COVID-19?
But as a guy, though, I kind of dig having masks. There's really not a lot of fashion stuff that's appropriate for men. And now that's like, I just got a pitch from Psycho Bunny about their whole line of fashion masks for guys, and I did a sponsored thing last week, and I'm like, it's kind of, I didn't really want to have to wear a mask everywhere, but if I got to, it's kind of nice to have a brand that I like, or something a little bit nicer than a surgical mask.
Can I just say, for women, it's also nice to like only have to wear makeup on half of your face, like when you go to the store or something.
I am going to share that with my wife. That is great advice.
Well, I learned it very quickly because, you get this nice mask that, has like the different layers, and it's like washable so you can reuse it, and you get the expensive filters to put in it and everything else. And the lining on the inside is white. So the first time I went to the store, I put it on, I get home, I take it off, and it's just orange on the inside. So it's like, okay.
I did that with my lipstick. I have like lip marks permanently in there. I tried washing them out, but still couldn't get them out. Whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing is,
Now,
you need
James
to
and
have
I aren't
bands
worrying about that one.
just on Saturday nights. Anyhow,
Saturday
that
night,
joke fell flat. But no, I think the thing is that you have a white fabric mask, and you need to get one of those really cool black ones from Dan.
Well,
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
yes.
I'll make sure Liz gets one to you. How's that sound?
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
All right,
I'll wear
all
it.
right.
It's a great conversation starter too, no matter where you're at. If it's got a logo on it, like,
Well,
what's that?
especially because if it's, if it says cruise, anything about cruising, people are going to be like, what? Right now, given that, and then we could tell them all about how Uncruise is actually sailing now in the US, which is amazing.
Yeah, of course we're underneath, the CDC concerns and that kind of thing, but I will say that it's been a real process. We work heavily with the state of Alaska's infrastructure, critical infrastructure, and CDC and all the different agencies here in Juneau to make sure we're pulling it off very safely. And the biggest thing is that our numbers are so low, and we're able to socially distance and get the crew spread out into cabins that aren't being used. Because really the bigger concern, as you're seeing anywhere you have these issues, tend to be with staff more than the guests. And so we're just as concerned for our staff as we are for our guests.
Well, and apparently my joke didn't fall completely flat. Thanks, Josh, for backing me up.
I picked it up, but I wasn't going to go there.
Yeah. Well, we're from Southern California, so there's a lot of stuff that's not normal the rest of the country.
I love it.
I had a specific question, but for some reason I can't remember it now. But come back to me in a second, guys. Because
I think the question was fam trips.
No, no, I forget what my question was. It was really good, but I'm trying to think of my.
It'll come to you. Think of something else. That's
I
always
know.
when things come back to me, is when you don't try to remember it.
It's driving me crazy.
Well,
Well,
while
Ashley-
going, Ashley.
I was just gonna ask. You're talking about crew and stuff. What is the the crew to guest ratio? I know that service is one of the things Uncruise prides itself on.
Yeah, well, on this boat this season, we actually brought on extra crew because we wanted to have the cleanliness and the rounds and the table service. There are no buffets, this kind of thing. So there's a lot to go along with COVID policy happening, but also we amped up our expedition staff, and that means that we're actually going further than we've done in the past and really having a lot of activities available to groups. That way we can lower the numbers on any particular group, get out there early morning, late afternoon, early evening, and provide these really safe environments for guests. So for instance, on this boat we have, I believe, 28 crew, and there'll be 38 guests. So it's it's almost
wow.
it's getting close to a 1-to-1 there.
That's pretty awesome.
I remembered my question. It's a two-part question. The first part is, what does your typical client look like who comes on Uncruise Adventures?
See that bald head? It looks a lot like me. I'm 60,
Okay.
and they start out about 45 or so. It's generally a case of being able to afford the product, and generally when kids are off in college, this kind of thing. So it starts off at about 45. It picks up heavily between about 55 and 70, and they all tend to be folks that are more experiential in mindset. So they're not, if they were they'd be the type that back when the Berlin Wall came down, they put a piece of it in their pack and took it home. They're the type that doesn't want to just see the glacier, but wants to feel the cold air or even touch it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're super athletic. It just means they're really, really different in the way they travel. It's got to be touch, feel, soulful almost. And so that is the typical kind of person we see. Typically, because they're coming on a trip like this, maybe they never stepped into a an outdoor store before, but they might have on, you know, brand new REI equipment or whatever brand, or really shabby stuff that they've been wearing for years. But like you were talking about earlier, Ashley, when it comes to what people wear, it's generally very casual. I think I've seen maybe 3 sports jackets a season out of about 6,800 people that come on board in Alaska. So it's very rare to see people get dressed up, and almost never hard-soled shoes. It's almost all running and, you know, comfortable shoes.
Now, that age group, of course, you know, there are very active people, but some people, as they tend to get older, have some limitations. How do you address that, or is there something you tell you know, how do you deal with that, or tell somebody this may not be a great cruise for you?
You know, it really almost everybody comes on board, and the reason being, you know, it maybe they're not going on trails anymore, but they still want to go on a beach stroll, or they still want to go out and see the whales from the skiffs or launches that we have. They're very easy to get into, and so what we see is a lot of times grandparents or parents bring their adult children along. And the adult children are the ones that really want to get out and burn some calories often. And a lot of times it's the grandparents might get together with another grandparent family, and they'll, you know, have a little time in the hot tub when everybody's ashore, grab a skiff and go whale watching, and take a stroll on a beach, or maybe go up and see some old totems in the forest, that kind of thing.
Well, gosh, I hope my parents are watching, because I would love to be their adult children that they bring along.
I wish my parents
Wouldn't we all?
Yeah.
And apparently you have a lot of fans. We're getting tons of comments from your fans that have done Uncruise, and it's always great to see that much of enthusiasm for a product. What's your percentage of people who rebook? I imagine it's pretty high.
That was going to be my other question.
Yeah, it's very high. You know, and it depends on the destination. So, for instance, in Hawaii, the Galapagos, Costa Rica, oh man, it can be 70-80% of the boat can be returners or higher. In Alaska is what we kind of call our seed stock. It's our home. It's where we started. It's what we're known for. In any given trip, it might be 20% that return to Alaska, but it's the other locations where most of our folks show up in mass.
So where's the crossover? Is the crossover from other adventure, like, you know, Lindblad and some of those guys, or is it, you know, more from, you know, a guy who like Celebrity, or, you know, do a Haven cruise on Norwegian?
It's really 2 stark areas. It's those that would never go on a cruise ship, big one, because they just don't like numbers, and those that have gone on a cruise ship and find that they want more experience. It's kind of that same person, same 2 people on board the ship, but they find that they want something else. As far as, you know, competition with Lindblad or those other small ship companies, not so much. You know, it's really people that maybe wouldn't be excited about a big ship, but they still understand the value of a boat being used as a tool to get to these rare places on Earth.
Gotcha.
It's interesting you say that, Dan, because I feel like with more mainstream cruising, people either really like it or they really don't. And one of the biggest complaints that I tend to hear when people don't like it is that there's not enough time in port or enough time to really experience or get a feel for an area. And it sounds like this is a fantastic solution to that.
Well, I think so. I always, when we started this so many years ago, I told people, what I want to do is I want you to be a guest on my sailboat. And on my sailboat, when I take you out, which I still have in Seattle, by the way, when I take you out on my sailboat, I want you to feel like I'm taking you to the very best places available, and we're not going to be in a hurry. So if we apply that to our company, we'll be successful. And I know I can't believe we're 25 years old as a company. I mean, am I that old? But it worked.
Congratulations on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
congrats.
It'll be in December, 25 years.
Where can we go in December to celebrate?
Oh, let's go. Let's go to Hawaii and see it like you've never seen it before.
That would be amazing.
Deal.
That would be
Reunion
amazing.
trip, James and Heather, reunion trip.
Yes,
Heck yeah.
that's where we met, was Hawaii. All of us on a cruise ship in
That's
Hawaii.
right. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was funny because a month earlier, so Heather's 50th state was Hawaii, and I had a line on a fam trip to Hawaii, and I was like, well, I can't wait, because she has to do her 40 or 50 before 50th state before 40. So I blew like 300,000 points on American Airlines. We did first class air and all. This great trip. At least I hope it was a great. She's still married to me, so it must have been good.
I love the Big Island. The Big Island is so gorgeous.
Oh,
We get back, and
My
Lucas
favorite.
get back, and like literally a week later, Lucas from Norwegian goes, "Hey, remember that conversation we had about maybe doing a Spirit of America or so whatever it was,
Pride of America.
Pride of America." I go, "Yeah, we just got back from Hawaii. It looked awesome." He goes, "Yeah, would you like to go on our trip next month?" And the answer obviously is yeah, but it's kind of one of those things. I hadn't been to Hawaii in 20 some years, and we went twice in 2 months. So let's do it again.
So much to offer. Well, we depart from Molokai and go to the Big Island, or the Big Island to Molokai. So we've got your Big Island there, Heather.
Oh yeah, the Big Island is just beautiful. I love how it's not that crowded, and you can just, it's huge as the name, the Big Island, but people don't realize you can look like you're in the mountains of Ireland or in a desert, or on the moon or something. It's very, very diverse.
Well, let's talk about your Hawaii itinerary a little bit, because I think one of the things that there's a lot of people who are like, "Oh yeah, I went to Hawaii. Where'd you go?" "Oh, I stayed in my resort the whole time." But you guys have a pretty cool thing where you're not just at Kona. You're also going. Are you stopping in I can't pronounce that word, but looks like you're actually going to places that most people would never have gone to.
Yeah, so it is. You can see that we start out in what's called Maui Nui, which is the Maui County area, which is Molokai, Lanai, Maui, and then we go over to the Big Island. And this is, we were talking earlier about, having time to do things right. And we at one time looked and, doing all the islands, but doing for our product, we need to be at a much slower pace. So we start out on Molokai, which is, it is like going back 80 years. It's you even in the little town of Kanakakai, you see many of the local elders still wearing traditional garb and with tea leaves leis and this kind of thing, and it is the birthplace of hula on Molokai. But yet no one goes there. There's really one small hotel that probably, a hotel Molokai maybe holds, I'm guessing around 80 people. And so it's really intimate. And then, of course, we go right through the center of Maui Nui is the Humpback Preserve. And that's where the humpbacks during certain months of the year go to frolic and birth their young. And so it's a very rich situation there. And then off the Big Island, what you get, we spent a couple days on the Big Island, particularly way down by South Point, you get some of the most amazing sea critters and snorkeling anywhere. The fish life down towards South Point is amazing. Then, of course, into Kailua and all that kind of thing. But we visit the state parks. There are certain national parks that we visit as well. And the nice thing is you can see those islands and not have to unpack or grab a taxi or an airplane. You're just settled right in and ready to go.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got a new convert. So
Josh is definitely an adventurer.
Yeah.
So Dan, forgive me if you mentioned this, but how long does a trip like that take from start to finish? Since you're saying that you kind of take your time and make sure that people really get to see what they came to see.
Yeah, in Hawaii, that's a 7-night, 8-day. That particular one runs Saturday to Saturday generally.
Okay. And do you, I'm sure the sailings vary in length depending on the destination and the location and stuff, but what's a range? Like what can a customer expect from?
It kind of depends what they want, but in Alaska, we have anywhere from 7 to 14 days. We used to have even a 21-day trip, but we didn't get too many people booking that one. But then, we have our shortest trips are 5 nights, 6 days. But it's real common that 7 to 10-day period is very common. I think people are kind of mentally set when they think of a boat for, that week and a half period.
Now, besides the San Juan Islands, are you guys looking at expanding to any other areas?
Well, not right now. We're, with COVID, it's kind of put a little bit of a squelch on expansion. I did spent several weeks in Antarctica this winter and working with a number of different operators, looking at whether we'd take a ship down there ourselves or not. I think Antarctica will probably be the next big destination we go to, but that's probably now. We were hoping to pull that off in 2021. But I think it's going to be 23, 24, with the disruption that COVID's brought on. But then the next real change is the itinerary I talked about out of the Seattle, the Salish Sea, Puget Sound, and San Juan Islands. That one is really tailored to a kind of a return to business after COVID. And that one starts up in May of next year.
Oh, nice.
Is that on your website? I didn't see that, or is it too early for your website?
Yeah, it's just coming out. In fact, I was when I was down in Seattle last week, I took the opportunity to take my sailboat into South Puget Sound and visit a lot of the parks I used to visit as a kid. And so we're just putting the final details on that, and that'll come out in October. Right now, we feel like the market is really not listening a whole lot, and so we'll wait till the market returns as we start going down the road for a vaccine, we hope.
And will that be the same general price point, the kind of $3,000 to $5,000 for a week?
It'll be a little bit less because
Okay.
it's 5 nights rather than 7.
Oh,
Yeah,
fair,
so it'll depart on Sunday and come back on Friday, and that allows people to get into the islands on periods when they're not busy on the weekends where locals are there, and also allows them to fly to and from or drive to or from over the weekend. So a lot of just good advantages in building it out in that fashion.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. One other question I have for you is, no matter what you tell people, I always tell people you're never going to be in your rooms, even on a regular cruise. You're barely going to be in your rooms. Don't really worry about your rooms, but people still worry about their rooms.
Very true.
What can you tell us about your rooms?
Well, our rooms on our most luxurious boats are nicer than any homes I've ever lived in. I mean, they're really beautiful, beautiful. That's our Hawaii boat is one of those. But what we find is that particularly our Genesis was more on the luxury end. And back when we were primarily a luxury company, we used to find that the first time people came on board, they booked the nicest cabin, spent the high dollar, booked that high cabin. Every time after that, they picked the lowest cabin, because exactly what you said, Heather, they find out, particularly on a product like ours, they go there to sleep.
Exactly.
And, so to go to that great expense to maybe have that little step out veranda like we have on a number of our boats is great. Love it. The whales might come by and you might see it, but the experienced traveler, for the most part, says, the value just isn't there, because I'm going to see the whales from a skiff, right? I'm going to see a bear from a kayak, so I am so with you.
Yeah, but to that point too, it's interesting because most major cruise lines, or most cruise lines, the people that are watching this are thinking about, even the smaller like riverboat stuff, everybody has kind of the same ships or the same 3 or 4 ships, but you've got, like, I think the Safari Quest I'm looking at right here, it's almost like a private yacht.
Oh, it is. That's our original boat, by the way. That was the first boat we owned, and I will say there's a lovely captain woman on that boat. Her name is Danae Blanchard, my daughter. And so she actually started working on that boat when she was 16 as a steward, and has been the captain of it for a number of years now. She's in her early 30s. And but yeah, the Safari Quest only handles maximum 22 people, and that's with, kind of a kit cabin that's a double bunk. So most of the time it goes out at 18 to 20 people. That is one of the two boats that are left over from when we were just into luxury travel, which was the first few years of our existence. And so it is very beautiful vessel. It is very much like a charter yacht, and a lot of families charter that boat.
Just as a full boat charter.
Yeah, because they'll have immediate family, extended family, and this, in the days of COVID, what we're seeing is it's not just family, but it's the people that live in that family bubble, or that bubble that people have created that they're still communicating with. So it's going to be interesting for our industry post COVID to see how this whole network of people living in their own bubble of family and friends, how that turns into kind of that multi-generational but really multi-friend travel.
Hmm. Well, we are definitely both personally and for business. It's always more enjoyable to cruise with friends. We met some friends. Gosh, I don't know. It's been
9
15
years
years or
ago.
9 years ago. Guys, that my time distortion recently is But honestly, those people I don't care where, I don't care what boat, but if these people said, hey, we're gonna do a cruise together, bam, let's book it. And I think that's really important to focus on the people as well.
I agree. It is going to be interesting. It would be fun a year from now to have this whole conversation again about how travel has changed post COVID, and what people value. And I think every company like mine, us being a small U.S. company, I think every company is sitting in the boardroom with a whiteboard. Well, maybe they're sitting at home with one person with a whiteboard, trying to figure out what that crystal ball says. And we think we're positioned in a great spot for that, just by the nature of what we do.
I think you guys are too, and congratulations for this coming up Saturday.
So
Well,
Yeah, it's
Kathy says
fantastic.
the Quest was her first experience with Uncruise, and she is in love, waiting for cruise number 5. So there we
Oh,
go.
yeah,
Kathy, come. Hey, Kathy, we're actually getting the Safari Quest underway for our Pacific Northwest itinerary in September, God willing. So who knows? Maybe we'll see you at Fisherman's Terminal in Seattle when we kick that one off.
So I just love it when you have all these awesome people that are so passionate about the brand. That says way more than any big radio TV ad campaign you could possibly do.
Oh, we ooze passion over here. Just ooze it.
Do you have any? What is your favorite itinerary?
Well, I'm an Alaska boy.
Yeah.
I
That's
am.
but to me, I would say that of all the places, if I use Alaska as my hallmark of where things are just wild and crazy and wildlife's everywhere, I have to say that there are parts of Panama that just blew me away that way. There are parts of Costa Rica, even in the heavily visited areas, that are just, the wildlife is over the top. The trip I took to Antarctica recently, I mean, the reason we're gearing up for that is because it has so many of the elements of Alaska. It doesn't have the wide variety of animals and such, but what is there is just explosive. I mean, explosive. And so I think that any itinerary that sits there, and gosh, the humpbacks in Hawaii and the culture in Hawaii, as I think about it, the culture in Hawaii is unbelievable. And I'm not talking about aloha. I'm talking about deep-seated belief, and
The
that's what we
spiritualness.
get on Molokai. And that is, the family that we work with there is just as authentic and real and kind as any human I've ever met.
For the Alaska trips, you mentioned that there's a lot of Alaskans that are your crew. Is that the same for for the ships that are in Hawaii, that you're actually getting real Hawaiians that aren't just bust in there, flown in there for the to work, but they actually are passionate about their home?
Yeah, I mean it's always a little bit of a breakup. I mean, breakup. That's not the right term. It's a mix.
Yeah.
So in Alaska, obviously, when Alaska is fully charged, there aren't enough people in Alaska to handle the seasonal
Mm.
surge. So I can say that our boat that's sailing here now is heavy Alaska residents, just because the boats aren't running right. But it is true that we have in Hawaii, we have Hawaiian residents, actually quite a few. You'll like that, Heather. They're from the Big Island. A few from
Woo!
Oahu, but a lot from the Big Island. In Costa Rica, we have a whole cadre of family from Costa Rica, a few from Panama. So yeah, it's never. I don't think we've ever been 100% in any destination with locals. Because they're going out there. What happens is they learn a skill on the boat, and then they want to take the next step up. Like maybe they want to become a chef rather than a sous chef, or they want to become a mate rather than a deckhand, and that oftentimes means going to a different vessel for a different opportunity.
Got it. Yeah, I just think it's great. Like I love cruising in general because you meet people from different cultures, and and on a big ship it's interesting. I'll be in Puerto Rico, but I'll be learning about a guy's homeland in his village in India or somewhere. But when I was in Hawaii, it was really and actually you were in there too. Like talking to the actual Hawaiians, and I don't mean that that's just the native Hawaiians, but the people who live there, even if they're white. Like you realize that Hawaii is a really fascinating place that is more than just that volcano over there and then some really pricey resorts. I mean, there's spirituality and stuff that you just wouldn't experience unless you asked a guy and listened.
It's peaceful in a way that I felt peaceful, like in a way that I haven't felt in other areas of the US. And I am amazed at how the native Hawaiians have been able to retain their culture despite being very, very Americanized. It's just they found a perfect balance of that. And every island too has its own personality. There's something very different about each one. So you're not going to get the same experience in two different places. And it's fascinating to me.
Very true. We were saying how different the
islands,
the shows at each island.
Oh yeah.
How they're different according to if they liked. I can't say his name.
Well, King Kamehameha was almost a godlike hero when we went to the luau shows in the Big Island, but then we went to Kauai, and it was just a little different, a different interpretation of who he was and why he was there and his impact. Which again, most people who've never been to Hawaii and certainly that have never ventured outside a resort don't really understand the nuances, and it's kind of like going to California. Northern California is not the same as San Diego, even though we're all the same state, and it's I think that your slower pace would be a great way of being able to let people explore that and experience the value, which again I think transcends a just strictly price point, because that's a memory that you're not going to be able to replicate otherwise.
Yeah, cultural travel is amazing. And that's exactly what you're able to do going on an Uncruise adventure.
Yeah, for instance, on Molokai, which is our home in Hawaii, it's where the boat base is out of. They don't really want. Our boat over there is only 36 passengers, and that's all they want. And
wow.
And years ago they actually turned a Holland America ship over. It turned them away when they tried to land. So it's we feel really privileged that they've taken us and adopted us in a way into the local family there, and we are obviously very sensitive about cultural norms and trying to honor and educate on that, but step very softly because we're just the visitor, right?
So question, I know you're kind of, you're in charge of the big picture and everything, and you started everything. Do you still sometimes just show up and you're on a ship, or do you still sail a ship, or what do you do?
Well, I today is a perfect example. Tomorrow or tonight, when the boat gets in, I'm going to go have dinner with the crew, and and they've been assembled for about a week. And so I'll go have dinner with the crew, talk to them. And of course, this is a group that I know very well because we're kind of down to just one boat operating at this moment. But yeah, I get aboard a lot. I'll be taking a trip on the 15th of August with some press on board the Wilderness Adventure as well.
Oh, nice.
And then I'm hoping, now this would be the really sweet thing, you guys. If I could get on there's a trip we're sending the boat back down to Seattle for Shipyard at the end of the season. So I'm kind of just thinking, I wonder if I could sneak on board for that trip.
Because I mean, let you.
It's your ship, right?
Yeah, it's my
just
ship,
go.
but yeah, I can. If other business things don't get in the way, I might just do that. But when you've had people you've worked with for so long, and they believe in what you're doing, it's like family, and the energy is fantastic. So I can say without doubt that they would love to have me on board too, which is an honor that means a lot.
Well, we definitely love your energy, and we can feel your passion through the screen, which is amazing.
So if anybody wants to go check out more about Uncruise, definitely go check their website out. I think there's some great photos, some great deck plans. You guys have really a lot of information there that I think help people get a better understanding for it. And again, I love, now that I understand why, I love the fact that the booking process is more kind of a concierge experience. So make sure you fill that out, and or if you don't want to fill it out, contact Heather directly, and
I need to become a travel advisor with you guys. Go through the trainings.
Our adventurous crowd, Heather, we got to get you in.
Yeah, exactly.
and those certain words that happen before the show are okay.
Everybody, well, people who know me know things. Yeah. No need to say anymore.
Did you adjust the saturation, Heather? Because your face is turning red. Then maybe the hue's wrong.
Hey now.
Anyhow.
Well, thank you again for taking time out to be with us today and tell us all about Uncruise Adventures. We're so glad you could come and tell us everything.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And just like me, I wish you, as small U.S. businesses, the best of fortune through all this. It seems like I get more encouraged every day, every time I'm with other small business people, and we're going to get through this. Keep the faith, and I look forward to talking on the backside again.
Awesome. Sounds great. Anything we can do to help you, please let us know.
Yes. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.